Garmagat, and at the outset I want to acknowledge the work of my colleague Pa Daly and Lee Daly in his office as well of the work on this bill, because the more transparency around wages is the better for all workers, as it can help to ensure a fair deal, obviously, from employers. Pay transparency is also an important tool for tackling the gender pay gap and other forms of pay-related discrimination. Progress has been made in the area of pay transparency, but there still more needs to be done, and some of those reasons and the measurements that have been done were outlined by Pa in his contribution. This bill seeks to ensure pay transparency for roles advertised for businesses and indeed for public sector organisations. It relies on the provisions of the Employment Equality Act 1998-2015 and specifically Section 10, which places an obligation on persons not to publish or display an advert which does not include the pay associated with the job. The bill amends Section 10 of the Employment Equality Act 1998 as amended to include an obligation to publish the approximate remuneration owed to the worker for taking up a contract of employment. What all this means is that no job adverts online or anywhere else cannot be included, have to include details on pay. It's very straightforward, and it's a practical step to make pay more transparent. This legislation is an important step in strengthening the position of workers, specifically in the job application process. Anyone who has searched for a job, especially online, will be familiar with scrolling down and finding where one expects to see a salary instead of an actual figure, phrases such as depending on experience or competitive salary. It's very disheartening. The process of applying for jobs can be a gruelling task with many steps to the application process. All workers should be able to see in advance what pay or pay range based on experience is being offered. This allows people to make an informed decision on whether or not to apply. Workers already employed by the company or in the same sector should be able to see the pay being advertised to new recruits. All workers stand to benefit from the common sense change to employment law, but as was said, this change will particularly help women and minorities to ensure that they are being offered the same remuneration at the end of the application process as any other candidate. This bill will also level the playing field for companies that already provide this level of transparency on pay. And it should be noted that most good employers do include details on pay. The legislation is making sure that all employers are obliged to follow suit. The truth is that the lack of transparency and asymmetrical information reduces the bargaining power of the applicant and skews the power in favour of the employer. Knowing the salary up front lets a candidate understand whether a job would be financially viable for him or her before committing the time and effort to apply. It shows workers already in the job what salaries are being offered to attract new employees, leaving the employer to negotiate with the successful candidate on salary after the fact can lead to women, particularly people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds and minorities, often ending up on lower salaries, and there's absolute evidence to back that up. An increasing body of research shows that salary transparency is the way of creating more equitable workplaces. In the third level sector in particular, we know that the working conditions for tutors and for lecturers and researchers have been eroded by the employment practices of underfunded colleges. We also know that it disproportionately affects women, as was said, and we have a particular problem in this country in terms of the labour force and labour force planning, because all of the research tells us that particularly women with school-age children, and especially lone mothers, are exiting the workplace because of the discrepancies between and the unfairness within employment and in employment conditions. So decisions around women working full-time or part-time or not working outside the home at all are impacted by all this. So I think this will be a knock-on effect of this legislation, that we will in some way, but there's an awful lot to be done, but we will in some way try to address that as well for mothers of school-age children. So the bill will contribute to the transparency and fairness of that, and it will also obviously impact on social welfare top-ups. So where social welfare are at the moment, in particularly in terms of the working family payment, where those payments have to be made. This bill should help as well to reduce that. So it's better for society, it's better for individuals, it's better for families, and it's a very, very simple bill that will fix a problem that we have, a growing problem.
Deputy Conway Walsh.